Cleveland Browns home game against the Green Bay Packers brings something that certainly has happened in history in the past, way past, not too far distant past, will happen in the present on Sunday, and certainly will happen sometime within the future. But you are going to get to see probably two of the most generational pass rushers that have ever been in the NFL between Myles Garrett and, of course, between Micah Parsons. It's a treat. It's something that, from a viewer standpoint, in my opinion, is a must-see game. We're going to talk about that. Obviously, some other things as we start cruising closer and closer to Sunday. Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network begins now. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd. We all here at the OBR cannot be more thankful for the continued support we get, whether it's the written content over at theobr.com. Our team just continues to push out great content day in and day out. Make sure you look into your VIP subscription. The insider option, the insider forums. Of course, your subscription gets bundled with a subscription in Paramount Plus. All fantastic things. Make yourself a more wiser and knowledgeable Cleveland Browns fan. And all support here for the OBR streaming network, beginning nightly at 6 p.m. with Browns 3D. Make sure you're subscribed, of course, to the OBR on YouTube and the OBR over on Twitch. I just got a couple of messages a couple of texts from friends. And normally a team like the Green Bay Packers, who look outstanding in the NFC, facing the 0-2 Cleveland Browns, who certainly right now have their issues, would not be regarded as many within the football circles as absolute must-see TV. But there are plenty who are really looking forward to this. And yes, if the guys who study D-line and pass rushers, yeah, that's a lot of the guys who were obviously very excited about this matchup here this week. Myles, it's just been everything you could hope for, of course, minus overall team success since he's been here in 2017. He's going to go from Cleveland to Canton that we heard, I guess it was last year, late in the regular season. It's the absolute facts. Myles has been everything you would dream. Not one monster contract extension, but two monster contract extensions at the time, making him the highest paid player on the defensive side of the ball, making him the highest paid non-quarterback in league history at both times. And even you saw it at times on Sunday against the Ravens. There are just, there were a couple of times where it twisted and coming in at an angle, and, nothing is impossible. Nothing is more impressive than when Myles Garrett is on the top of his game. He shared that sack last week. It was a half a sack, of course, with him and Cam Thomas. The two of them came together on the very next play, and instead of it being a sack, they actually destroyed the running back in the backfield. Like when Myles gets on a heater, and it was the two sacks back-to-back, of course, against Bengals as well. When Myles just gets on an absolute heater, there is no answer. One man, two men, three men, all at the same time, going through each block separately. There's just nothing he cannot do. It's just an absolute joy to watch. 3.5 sacks through 2 games. Trying to get, I believe it'd be 14 sacks for 5 straight seasons. He is just a guy, when you talk about somebody, that was drafted number 1 overall and not a quarterback, what is the dream? What is the ultimate dream scenario that said player turns into? And it's absolute, Myles. There's just no way around it. And Although this run here for the team during Miles' time has been more successful than the Browns have seen since the return in '99. I certainly understand those who, feel upset that it's maybe not better, but he is just an absolute game changer, and he has been since the day he was drafted, and just started cutting his teeth in the NFL with his first sack rushing from the interior against the New York Jets in 2017. Green Bay got into just an absolute fantastic position where Dallas did everything they could to absolutely screw things up in regards to the Micah Parsons contract negotiations. And to the point where that Micah Parsons was just so frustrated. His agency had done their due diligence and basically had gone around the league and kind of found who would be the guy, who would be the team that would look to be able to give Micah the biggest bag of bags. And the deal had been agreed upon. Other teams tried to jump in. However, Myles held all the leverage once it became more and more real that the Cowboys were going to move on from him. Simply, I won't sign an extension with that team. Done. So, and I'll continue to say Green Bay pulls off the heist of a lifetime. Just say this out loud. The Green Bay Packers got Micah Parsons for less than the Cleveland Browns traded the number 2 pick, which became Travis Hunter in last April's draft. The Browns got more for an unknown commodity than the Dallas Cowboys got from Micah Parsons. It's absolutely mind-blowing. And for Green Bay, it was the one thing that was missing, as this new form of the Packers has been, kind of surging here over the last couple of years. And, the way it was the Favre regime, then the Rodgers regime, now certainly the Love regime. But the one thing they were missing was just that elite difference-making defender, i.e., in this scenario, pass rusher. If you look at one of the most successful teams in the NFL over the last few years, and the Kansas City Chiefs, and like so many times, there were so many games where yes, Mahomes great and his weapons and all of that, but somebody just had to be a dude on the defensive side. Kind of has always been Chris Jones. Green Bay needed that Chris Jones dude. These playoff games we see every year, you get great quarterbacks going against each other. When we get to like money time, 8, 9 minutes to go in a fourth, a 34-31 game, 30-27 game. And each quarterback is just out there tearing it up. And on some special instances, there's a defensive player who just absolutely changes things. Aaron Donald certainly was that type, without question. That is what Green Bay has now with a guy like Micah Parsons. And the thing with Micah is, he can line up over your left tackle, he can line up over your right tackle, he can line up with the guard, he can line up with the center. He can line up and basically just look pre-snap like he's an off-ball linebacker. And he can either rush from that standpoint or just start creeping up the closer and closer the quarterback is snapping the ball. Green Bay's just barely scratched the surface with what they can do with him. And I think it's really gone pretty well so far because you certainly see that, the play is picking up from the 10 other players on the field while Mike is on the field. And that's when somebody who is that good, elite, the guy that keeps the offensive line coach and the offense coordinator up every single night with the main goal on the top of their nose for the week. Whatever we do, we can't let Myles Garrett beat us. Whatever we do, we cannot let Micah Parsons beat us. And it happens still a lot. So this will be one part of Sunday where I'm kind of just going to fanboy a little bit because the way it goes, both of these guys eventually end up in Canton, Ohio. And conceivably could be that these guys are viewed as Mount Rushmore pass rushers in NFL history. Two of the best to ever absolutely do it. We've got our injury report today from Browns and Packers practices. Joel Bitonio, he spoke, said he didn't think the back was a big issue, but the Browns did keep Joel Bitonio out of practice yet again today. Corey Berhaquez with the ankle, it's described as a full. The Browns did work out a couple of punters just in case. But you got to think if Corey could get through Thursday practice, Corey should be good to go on Sunday. Limited practice in returning to the practice field for DeAndre Carter. Again, with concussions, it's a different type of protocol, but if he can get through tomorrow unscathed, there could be a good chance where DeAndre Carter carries either a questionable or a probable rating into Sunday and most likely to go. Malik Collins was given a veteran day off yesterday, practiced in full today. Jack Conklin, and there was a small video put out, and I think it was overanalyzed to death, but Jack Conklin limited again today in practice, and you can see the big brace on his right elbow. Grant Delpit, full practice. This one, because you were really thinking this was probably about the timetable, but Mike Hall, who was limited yesterday in practice, DNP today on the bikes. So that's going to tell you that Mike Hall is not going to be back on Sunday. And until we get more clarification, we get more word, there's nothing to be viewed as a setback. I said this all along. The Browns were not going to just be absolutely pushing to get Mike back on the field. It was when they felt Mike was as 100% as he could be to get back on the field. There is no reason. The Browns have plenty working for them right now on the defensive line. So as much as we'd all like to see Mike Hall back, it's understandable that, he should be, given the time to make sure that it is 100% ready for Mike to return. Denzel Ward, second straight full practice after the dehydration issues Sunday in Baltimore. Looking at it from the Packers standpoint, offensive lineman Zach Tom with the oblique, second straight limited practice. So that would be the right tackle position. Bo Melton, reserve cornerback, limited for the second straight day. Tyler Croft with a knee, didn't practice yesterday, limited today. He's a horse. Josh Jacobs, limited both days with an ankle. And, I don't know if you put much into that or you don't put much into that, shouldn't put much into that. But keep in mind, Packers played a week ago today. So, there is some dings to these guys because, they had the extra rest. So, obviously these guys aren't necessarily 100%, not that anybody in the NFL ever is. But, I think you put a tad bit more stock into this because they were coming off last week playing Thursday night as opposed to, playing Sunday and the turnaround, of course, on the short week. Packers got some weapons. We all got to see Croft the other night on Thursday Night Football, just, really, really coming into his own. Jordan Love, I think, played a little hesitant, which is probably scary for the rest of the league. I don't know if he's necessarily 100% on time with everybody. That's going to come. Oh, certainly it's going to come. The rookie Matthew Golden, and he's not really been much of a factor. And That's certainly scary because, you talk about a guy who was just electric last year in the college football playoffs. And, Isaiah Bond was the name last year at Texas as the transfer wide receiver. Everybody wanted to see. Everybody thought there was going to be this huge breakout numbers production. No, it was the lesser talked about transfer wide receiver from the University of Houston, Matthew Golden, who essentially became wide receiver one for the Texas Longhorns last year. So much so, blew through the season statistically fantastically, tore up at the combine. And then, for me, and if you guys remember draft talk, we were definitely talking about Matthew Golden. But all of a sudden, it got to the point where it was like, wow, Matthew Golden round one. I think this just got a little bit too rich for my blood. Certainly, where he went, nowhere range where the Cleveland Browns would have been selecting anyway. But you look at some of these guys that Green Bay has acquired over the last few years. Certainly getting Micah for a joke of a trade. Of course, there's safety that came over from the New York Giants. Just an absolute fantastic player, and a player that a lot of people were scratching their heads over, that, basically the Giants just let him walk, and the fact that maybe there weren't a lot of other people interested. And of course, we're talking about Xavier McKinney, and there was some early injuries in his career in New York. But when he was on the field, he was phenomenal. Green Bay just signed him off the street. Not much. Josh Jacobs. Raiders just let him go. Boom. Green Bay Packer. Done. Sometimes in the NFL, you may come into issues with players as far as being on your roster, but just not forcing it to happen to lose a player under your own terms can just get to be really, really foolish. And now you look at three of the most predominant Packers on that roster right now: Parsons, Jacobs, McKinney. And for all three of them, it was because the franchises that drafted them were too stupid to make a heavy financial investment to keep them around long term, after they had already put a pretty heavy, decent investment into them from Jump Street. Running a professional sports team, of course, it is a very difficult thing. But some of the things you see some of these organizations do just make you absolutely, your eyes pop out of your head. You obviously value the guy a ton, but then you dragged your feet, didn't offer whatever, and whatever this run the Green Bay Packers are going to go on for the next few years. If I'm a Raider fan, I'm a Cowboy fan, I'm a Giant fan, I'm pissed. Because part of this run is going to be done by three great young players that at one time were all part of your franchise. And the Cowboys, yeah, they'll get 2 first-round picks and, Kenny Clark. Odds are good when those 2 first-round picks are made in the late 20s or even 32 overall by Dallas. Neither one of them's going to even come close to filling one of Micah Parsons' cleats, let alone 2 of them. Can the Browns attack this Packers defense? Can the Browns get their offense going? I hate to think it's going to go this way because it's so early in his career. I think the Browns are going to put a lot of their eggs in Quinshon Judkins' basket on Sunday. I think the Browns are hoping that, behind Quinshon Judkins, there's a way they can maybe get the game started in their favor. Score first, get on the board first, can maybe control, first quarter or so time of possession wise. And I think their goal for that is probably through the legs of Quinshon Judkins. And certainly Dylan Sampson factored in as well. But you have to. You have to find a way to run the ball with some success. These teams have been playing basically cover 2 and shell coverage against you through the first 2 weeks. The only way these defensive backs are going to start coming closer to the line of scrimmage is if the Browns start ripping off 4.5, 5 yards per carry consistently. It's the only way. So that tells me that the Browns are really going to try to feature Judkins. And of course, at times it's been really a big key to the Cleveland Browns offense under Kevin Stefanski, which certainly leads to a lot of play action, leads to a lot of rollouts, which again, running some rollouts with a 40-year-old who, kind of looks like Lady Liberty back there in the pocket just isn't really necessarily jiving with what I feel is the best use of Joe Flacco, and certainly what the best use of Joe Flacco's talents are at age 40 years old. I know when I talked yesterday about Dylan Gabriel being closer to playing than maybe people want to admit, but you can't tell me, after 2 games that, that's not an immediate thought for a lot of people, because I know it is. And I've certainly seen other people come around and actually bring it up now as well. Because on the offensive side of the ball, that's what it's really about this year. It's about the development of Judkins and Sampson and Fannin and, seeing exactly what you can get out of Isaiah Bond, who the Browns have a very high investment in. Certainly not your everyday unrestricted free agent by any means whatsoever. And then, of course, the quarterbacks. I did get some people, kind of reaching out to me going, well, Gabriel will play. Well, what about Sanders? The way the offensive line is performing right now, I think some of the same issues you're seeing with Joe Flacco would not be much different than the issues you would see with Shedeur Sanders. Go back to the final preseason game. Shedeur and, consistent amount of pass pressure. It's just not something that works well for Shedeur Sanders right now. And unfortunately, there's no way to know if he's, getting any better with it. Certainly not seeing him do much, right? But this is all part of, what this year is about, is trying to turn around and develop as many young players as possible. Offensive side of the ball, defensive side of the ball. Now, on defense, certainly a key for the Browns is going to be, how do you handle the run game? Can they slow down Josh Jacobs? Can they be consistent in stopping the run like they have been through the first 2 games? Green Bay's O-line isn't there yet. As I mentioned, starting right tackle Zach Tom dealing with an oblique, has not put in a full practice yet this week. And I don't know if I'd be in any rush to get back to the field to face this Cleveland Browns defensive line by any means whatsoever, the way these guys are all playing right now. Denzel Ward should be back, which makes things a little easier. The Packers have good receivers. They don't necessarily have, like, headline receivers. There isn't a Zay Flowers on this wide receiving core. Jaron Reed is kind of that guy, but, as, we all know now, he had foot surgery and collarbone surgery in the last day, so not a player this week for sure. So Dobbs and, of course, Golden and, others, that the Browns are going to have to do what they can to control and get these guys, under wraps, so they can just kind of let the defensive line just go and get it done. Browns, and I don't think they will. But you can't win this week, or should maybe I say you don't win this week. I'm not sure why the plan would just continue to be Joe. And it has to be more than, well, if Andre Schmidt didn't miss the 2 kicks in week 1, they'd be 1 and 2. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. Well, they're playing some really tough opponents, and it might not be the best thing to put the rookie quarterbacks out. I mean, I'll listen to it. It's not like, the craziest thing I've ever heard, but these guys are not gonna change your mind about drafting a quarterback in April anyway, Gabriel and, of course, Sanders. So if they can't do well against the Green Bay Packers, the Detroit Lions, and Minnesota Vikings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I'm okay with that. They weren't drafted in the first round. They were drafted late on day 2 and late on day 3. I don't believe the thought process for either guys are just gonna go out there and be world beaters from day 1. Unrealistic to believe that. But if this gets to 0 and 3, which is certainly a really strong possibility to happen on Sunday, I just don't get how the plan of A, Flacco gives us the best chance to win, to B, we're just gonna keep playing Joe Flacco. If it gave you the best chance to win, then things would probably look better to this point. So if they look a little less good than they do with Joe Flacco, but that means Dylan Gabriel's getting playing time, getting experience, learning on the job, I'm sorry. That's more important. So again, I don't know exactly how this all works because you're just not seeing enough from Joe Flacco quarterbacking this team where I can say it's justified. I'm already here and it's been 2 games. They don't win Sunday, I will probably no longer be quiet about it. I'll probably be pretty stinking loud about it. Love Joe. Like Joe. 23 was great. And this was always one of my biggest issues. And this certainly goes back to the 2024 offseason before he was brought back for the 2025. And the 2025 offseason was we're never going to recreate that late regular season of 2023 with Joe Flacco again. It was just an absolute great time. 5, 6 weeks. Former villain came in out of nowhere late on a plane on a Sunday night to visit town. Then a few short time later, there he is. Starting a game at quarterback for the Cleveland Browns in Los Angeles against the Los Angeles Rams. A game they probably should have won. So that was always my biggest fear with bringing Joe back is you were just never going to get that magic back again. It was just such a special time, a special scenario, certainly the winning and closing out and clinching a playoff spot. It was just the magical of magical nights. To think it was ever going to happen again as Joe was just getting older and older. It was more hope than it was mental think. But he's got to get better. The offense has got to get better. Otherwise, there is zero reason that he should be out there starting at the quarterback position for the Cleveland Browns over grooming 2 young kids and letting them show the Browns community what they have. We appreciate you all for all the support here at the OBR, whether it's the written content over at theobr.com. Of course, make sure you get that VIP access, insider forums, Ask the Insiders, your subscription bundles, with a subscription for Paramount Plus. Go ahead and take advantage of that. The OBR streaming network, nightly beginning at 6 o'clock. Various shows throughout the week, post-game shows Sunday. Make sure you're subscribed to the OBR on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribed to the OBR on Twitch. All that being said, this has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network, and we will talk to y'all tomorrow.